消息，因为呢，他就是说呢，本身也是加拿大国际象棋18岁组的冠军，北美青少年的冠军和泛美青少年冠军，国际棋联大师。他呢，实际上呢是我很早就认识的，因为我女儿跟他一起很小的时候，在8岁的时候就和 Michael 一起10岁在 play 的 chess，就是他们一起国际象棋，所以我非常清楚这个孩子。而且他的爸爸呢也是做 IT 的，所以呢他是父承子承父业哈，就是 Michael，然后也是学这个。而且呢，这里最值得大家关注的是，因为呢，他呢在2019年去年的秋天呢到硅谷，大家都知道呢，那个就是学 computer science 最好的地方呢，一般都是在硅谷，大家都知道的，所以他去那里实习。而且呢，今年呢也已经在多伦多呢进行了金融软件的公司实习。他现在还在读，还没有毕业，对吧？还有大概2年的时间，所以呢，他属于是在校生。而且呢，我们今天非常感谢呢，我们利用这个爱维教育的平台呢，给大家提供这个机会，让呢就是所有就是不论是在国内、在美国还有加拿大的孩子呢，都有机会呢了解呢这个滑铁卢大学这个计算机及金融管理专业。因为呢，我觉得呢就是说很多的我们的孩子都很喜欢读 computer science，就是这个计算机，但是呢，实际上呢有些这个竞争是非常激烈的，而且呢在里边呢，我想很多的孩子也想知道，或者家长也想知道有些什么方式可以呢，就是说帮助这些孩子在提前做一些准备，或者呢需要注意一些什么在申请大学的时候。那么呢，我们就请呢 Michael 送呢这个时间呢交给他，让他呢给大家呢进行一定的讲解。因为一开始有接龙的问题呢，大概有15道题，这个时间呢他大概要用45分钟的时间。然后呢，我们会有15分的时间呢，15分钟的时间给大家呢就是自由来问问题，但是我希望大家能够在我们的这个聊天里头呢，把问题写出来，最好是用英文，因为这样的话，Michael 呢直接可以看到，因为这儿长大的孩子可能读中文比较困难，他可能会听，但是读或者写比较困难。当然了，如果你实在写不了英文呢，我可以 translate 给 Michael，然后呢，他可以在剩下的15分钟呢给大家进行解答。然后我们再一次感谢呢 Michael 呢能够在这个就是疫情期间，然后坚持呢给大家做公益，也能够呢给大家呢愿意来分享，抽出这个时间。我们感谢呢 Michael 的父母，当然他们也是我们的老相识了，也是我的老相识，他们也是积极的支持这个活动。然后呢，我希望所有的人呢都能够通过这个就是分享，然后呢得到呢自己所想了解的事情，而且呢能够呢帮助到大家。好，谢谢。现在请 Michael 把这个回答问题，先介绍一下自己，然后开始回答问题，好吧
？Yeah, thanks, Jack's mom, for the lovely introduction. I guess I'll just, maybe add on to that introduction a bit. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael. Thanks for coming out today. So, just as Jack's mom mentioned, I played chess in elementary school, high school, all the way up to university. Currently, I'm in my 3rd year at the University of Waterloo, doing computer science and finance. So, anything related to like university applications or university life, internships, perhaps just anything related to that kind of sphere of knowledge. Feel free to leave questions in the chat. I do have some pre-made list of questions, but original questions from the audience I think are always better. So feel free to jump in at any point. And I guess with that, I'll just go down the list. So the first question that I see is how do extracurricular activities affect learning? That's a good question. So I assume that a lot of you probably have activities that you're involved in outside of school. For me, it was chess personally, and that did eat up like a lot of time. So typically every day I would spend about maybe 2-ish hours on chess. But I think what you gotta be aware about is you have to kind of be aware of your own time management. So for me, like I was fortunate enough that most of the work, I'd say it was like pretty trivial. And so I would get my schoolwork done within like, 2-3 hours ish. And then I would have the rest of the evening open to studying chess. For different people, right, there's like different learning habits because, some people might take like 5-6 hours to finish their work or something. And then you got to kind of prioritize because I think what's often misunderstood is that some people place a very large emphasis on education and getting good grades. And don't get me wrong, like those things are super important, especially for university applications. But at the same time, they shouldn't kind of eat away into your other activities if they're an important part of you. Like if you're just kind of screwing around and wasting time like on online games, I mean, assuming that you're not like a professional gamer or anything like that, like all those things you kind of have to like cut out a little bit. But if you have an activity that you're seriously invested in, like don't cut that back at all, because that's a super important part of you. And more importantly, it's hopefully something that you do for enjoyment as well, right? So for me, I was kind of pushed in the direction to spend less time on chess, but I think I actually spent more. And what you have to keep in mind is that, when you're applying for university, it's not only the grades, it's like a holistic picture, right? And so if you have like 99 average, but nothing outside of that, it's not really that meaningful. So cut on the kind of non-essential stuff, but the things that are really a core part of you, don't cut on that. And I guess find a study strategy that works for you. Again, this is not like a one size fits all answer, because different people have different learning styles, right? So personally for me, like one thing that I thought was super helpful was a lot of people just tend to like highlight notes and things like that. And then I read some study that highlighting actually doesn't work, because most people just like highlight everything and then the whole page becomes yellow, and it's not really like a good way to digest information. And then they said like making some keywords in different colors. So like any keyword that I had to memorize, like I would put in red font or something. Just these little things here and there. These things do add up. And so the earlier you can find study strategies that work for you, you'll find that increases your efficiency a lot. And so instead of just banging your head against the wall and having things not come to you naturally, figuring that out for yourself, I think is super important. So I guess the second question is kind of related to that. It was basically how to balance like school and extracurriculars. So I think I pretty much answered that. So I'll just move on to the next question. And guys, feel free to, message in the chat as well. Don't be shy. Okay, so the third question is, what is the most difficult part about studying? It's kind of vague. Not sure exactly what a difficult part is. I would say for me, the difficult part of studying is doing things that are kind of menial. And what I mean by that is, I'm sure we've all been in those situations where, let's say you have some math questions and there's like 5 questions, and all these questions are like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F, and they're literally all the exact same question, just with different numbers. And so in high school especially, you'll have a lot of menial tasks like that. And so it can be frustrating. But the important thing to know here is that you basically have to kind of take it as a challenge to yourself and to your work ethic. Like, instead of getting frustrated by a question, you just got to have the mentality of like, screw this question, I'm going to blitz through it, and we're going to move on to more interesting stuff. And so, once I just kind of took that approach, it was pretty easy. And then I guess another difficult part is like some subjects are just extremely difficult to certain people. So for me, at least, this is back in elementary school, but just as a general idea, art was a subject that I seriously struggled with, because I was a terrible artist, like no talent whatsoever in this area. And so you have to kind of set expectations that are reasonable. So for example, I'm a terrible artist. I know that I don't expect to get like a 90 in my art classes, right? But that doesn't mean you can just like leave it aside. So set goals for yourself that are attainable. So for me, I set my goal at 80 for art, but make sure that you are still judging yourself against those goals. Because a lot of people will just say, okay, I'm horrible at the subject. Like, I don't care about it as long as I pass. And that could be like a very dangerous slope to go down, because then you just care less and less, and your marks get worse and worse, and you go off a cliff, right? But setting reasonable benchmarks and then making sure you're hitting them, I think is a good thing to do for those courses that people struggle with. So I see one question in the chat. Unfortunately, I can't read it. I guess I'm not sure if it's a question actually, but anyways, I'll just move on to the next question in the list, which is how to be interested in the computer science major. So I'm not sure if the translate is that good for this question, but the funny thing is, for me at least, that computer science was not an area that I was interested in at all. Like it was basically at the bottom of the list. Um, and there's a funny reason why, because both my parents are in like IT related fields, right? And I just saw them grinding at the computer like every evening, just looking at some small screen on the laptop. I thought to myself, oh, this sucks. Why would I want to do this? So computer science really was never my first choice. That is not true for most of computer science students, I would say. Most CS students have like a really strong desire to go into computer science. Like they get in at a young age, they build projects on the side, and like they breathe and eat code, right? And so if you're one of those people, like, you know, the world is yours basically. Like you have a bright future ahead of you. Just keep doing what you're doing and you'll be fine. So what I interpret from this question is like for people that aren't necessarily interested in computer science like me, how do you kind of develop an interest in it? So for me personally, like I was always more interested in the finance side of things. Like I was following the stock market for like years before I was even legally allowed to invest. And so that was always the area that interested me the most. But at the same time, you know, anyone with two eyes can see that the world is becoming so digitized, even in, you know, more traditional areas like finance. You'll see that a lot of the new finance hirings are computer science people. And not only like quantitative firms, just like across the board. There's just so much demand for this right now. And so for me, computer science was kind of a necessity. I kind of basically thought to myself, if I want to work in finance, I'm going to need to know computer science. Like there's no way that you can get around that right now. And so the program that I enlisted in was CFM, which stands for Computing and Financial Management. So if you think about that, it's basically a mix between computer science and finance. And to be honest, like I was, even after I got into that program, computer science was kind of interesting, I thought, but at the same time, it was extremely difficult because I had no program experience going into university at all. And so I struggled in a lot of my computer science courses. But for me, what really piqued my interest is applying computer science to the finance industry. And so in each of my 4 co-ops at Waterloo, our internships are basically called co-ops. I worked in finance related fields, but in 2 of them, they were actually more computer science focused roles. And so once you kind of appreciate the power and importance of computer science, you really just kind of develop a liking to it. And so you'll see that, you know, if you're going to a CS related field with a CS mindset, like maybe 80 to 90% of the jobs will be just like traditional software engineering, software development roles, right? And so you'll be fine. And then for the people that are not like super into that software engineering mindset, try to find ways that computer science intersects with your area of knowledge. Like I have friends that are doing biology right now, for example, and like they need to study computer science as well because right now a lot of the research is being AI driven. So a lot of the new kind of healthcare and biology companies, they use like AI to try to detect diseases. And there's a whole industry that's booming around this area right now, especially in this era that we're living in. So just trying to find an intersection between what you like and computer science, I think is really the key here. So I'll move on to the next question. Have I ever liked to play games and how to deal with it? To be honest, I never really played that many games. Like I spent a lot of time on chess, right? So that really ate away from a lot of the free time I had. And I was never into like the whole video game thing. I was like the other games I played were like poker and backgammon. So also a, you know, kind of mix of strategy / like gambling games. So video games, it was never really a thing for me. But if you do play a lot of those games, try to realize that at some point you're going to have to cut down because you can, like, honestly, you can probably get away with it in high school because in high school, like, there is work, but it's not like a tremendous amount of work, right? So you can do both at the same time, I would assume. But once you get into university, like, that's a whole different story. Like, you don't have much free time, especially if you're in like a really intensive program like CS or software engineering or any engineering field, basically. So you don't have to like get rid of it overnight, basically. But if you are in a position where you're like spending a lot of time on distractions, just try to scale back maybe like 5 minutes a day until you finally get to a point where you're comfortable with. Okay, so next question I have on the list is, does Waterloo computer major require high GPA and other conditions? So I can talk about Waterloo and I guess Canada specifically, or at least Ontario. So in Ontario, I would say about 90% of the admissions is based on GPA. And preferably you have a GPA above 90 in Ontario. Mid 90s is probably where you want to be at. It's kind of unideal, I would say, that the entire admission is based on GPA. Keep in mind that this doesn't apply to US. In US, like if you're applying to Ivy League schools and all that stuff, there is like a more holistic process. It's not just your GPA. But for Ontario schools, it's mostly your GPA. And if you're going to get into a competitive program like software engineering or something like that, you want to be, I would say, like at least 93, 94. Even that, however, might not be enough. So, if you can get high 90s, that's preferable. But okay, like that's obviously not possible for everyone, right? And so what are some other things that you can do to, boost your chances of getting in? Try to find like competitions or extracurriculars that are relevant to the program that you're applying in. So for example, in Waterloo, Waterloo hosts like these math and computer science contests every year. And so one of the friends that I lived with in San Francisco, like he actually got rejected by Waterloo on the initial admissions run. But because he did like pretty well in the computing contest, Waterloo changed their mind and they let him in. So, even though he got cut, just by participating in a contest, you can boost your chances. And there are these rumors that circulate in high school about, oh, like, well, what if I do super crappy on the contest? And like, is Waterloo going to look at that and be like, I don't want this person? That's not the case. I can tell you that. So just by participating, you're actually already boosting your chances, because that shows like you have, some interest in what's going on. Like even if you participate and get 0, it's better than not participating at all. So, don't be scared about performing badly. Like the worst case, it doesn't hurt you. And then the best case, it might significantly increase your chances. So that's what I have to say about Waterloo admissions. So I'll move on to the next question. How do you stand out from, okay, this is poorly translated, but basically what I think this question is saying is like, how do you stand out in the co-op application process? So this is a question that is not only applying to Waterloo, because like I have friends at McMaster that are basically in the same boat when it comes to competing for like research positions. So this question is basically very broad and applies to any kind of like summer internship type position. So I had a mentor in first year and he gave me some really good advice, which is treats the job application process with the same amount of effort that you would another university course. So think of your like hardest university course, how much effort you put into that course, and basically do at least that. And that's something that really resonated with me, because in first year, at least, you'll see that a lot of people are really not on top of the job search. So a lot of people will be like submitting resumes at 9 p.m. the day before they're due. And if you're doing that, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. Like if you know that you're going to be applying to summer jobs, then before the application period even opens, like you should have a resume ready. You should have some cover letters ready, and preferably, you get those documents like roasted by seniors over and over again. Like bring it to your friends, bring it to your upper year mentors, and have them just revise it. And you'll end up having a product that you'd be pretty happy to put out there, like when the actual job application process starts. And then depending on the field that you're interested in, like there are some other things you can do. So for example, in computer science, like if you're going to be, if for example, that your goal is to get into Google or something, then you should be doing like side projects, or you should be like leak code grinding on the side. If any of you don't know what those are, you can Google it and you'll see very quickly what it is. But in every field, like there are some certain things that you can do to bolster your chances. For me, like I got my first job in finance, and what they really liked about my application is that I did, I think, 2 stock pitches before I even applied. So a stock pitch is basically like where you present to a group of judges. You're saying, I want to buy this company because of X, Y, and Z reasons. And so if you do like these extracurriculars, like they really do help your chances. The one thing I would be cautious of though is trying to join like every single club. Like I see people do this all the time where they try to join every club. You get some title like VP of something in this club, and you're like on 5 clubs and 5 different leadership positions, and people think that that makes them look better. It actually doesn't, because it kind of feels fake, like you're just going to the club for the title. And if there are clubs that you're super passionate about, like by all means, go for it. Try to become president or whatever, but don't join a club, for the sake of joining a club, because like recruiters, they see right through that. So it's always better to kind of have a narrower focus, but put really a lot of emphasis on that focus and make sure you stand out in that certain area. So that's, I would say, also a very important thing to keep in mind. So the next question here is, have I ever had problems in my college career? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think most people do. It's very mentally challenging in a sense, because I assume that a lot of you are probably like pretty good students. So you might be used to getting like 99% averages in high school, which is basically what I did. And once you get into university, like you quickly realize that you're not special anymore. Like you're literally just, unless you're a genius, you're probably just like middle of the pack or somewhere. And so that really takes away a lot from your ego. And so many people struggle to make that transition. Like they go from getting 99 and now all of a sudden they're getting 75. And so that could be challenging, and you just have to realize that marks aren't everything. Like that's the main advice I would give there. Don't stress about it too much. Just as long as you're doing your best, like don't try to judge yourself against other people, which I think is a pretty toxic mindset to have anyways. And then like, yeah, there are challenges. For example, in my CS course, like I was very close to failing one of my computer science courses. And then I had a friend help me with some of the projects, and having a support circle is really important. Like making friends early on in that kind of first like 2 weeks of university, that's super important, because these are the people that you're going to lean on, for your entire degree, basically. At the same time, they also lean on you, right? So it's like a mutual benefit. So try to meet as many new people as you can early on. Not just for the grades, obviously, like, just from a social and well-being perspective, like that's obviously a good thing to do. But it also helps with your academics as well. So make sure you have that good friend circle set up really early. Okay, so the next question I have is, will my future career direction be related to what I'm studying? I'd say like 100%. I'm studying like computer science and finance, so that itself already is pretty broad. So, just from a probability perspective, like there's a good probability that I'm going to be working in one of those 2 fields down the line. Then that might not be the case for everyone. Like it's very common today for people to change degrees, go into fields that have no relation to their study whatsoever. And so even if you're one of those people that get into university and then you're like, well, I don't like what I'm doing, like don't be afraid to go outside the box. Like you don't have to confine yourself to whatever you're studying. Like there's so many opportunities out there that as long as you put in the effort, like you can find opportunities in every field, basically. But for me, like I'm super passionate about finance, and now I'm getting more passionate about CS. So yeah, I'll probably be going down this line in the future. Okay, so next question I have is, well, it says, I don't know, it's poorly worded again, Google Translate, but basically like what's the admissions process with applying to Silicon Valley internships? So at least in Waterloo, there is like this meme about Cali or bust, which is basically saying like the jobs in Cali or California are like way better than the other jobs, and the other jobs are like quote unquote a bust. Um, it's obviously not true, but that is not taking away from the fact that the jobs in California are, for the most part, like really, really fun. There's a number of reasons why. Like obviously they pay like really good salaries. If you talk to anyone working in Silicon Valley, they're making like boatloads of money. But just the idea of being like in a different part of the world and having the chance to explore, like that's also a super fun aspect of it as well. In terms of applying, like it really depends. I actually didn't work in a programming role in Silicon Valley. I worked as a venture capital intern. And so like my job would be to, look at startups that are trying to raise money and then seeing if we as a venture capital firm should invest in them or not. And so it was definitely like more of a finance/investing background, which is where my previous jobs took me. But if you are going to apply for Silicon Valley jobs, like as I said, you're going to need to have things that are outside of grades in order to be successful. So leak code grinding is almost like a necessity in a sense, just doing like all these algorithm practice questions, and obviously having side projects. So nobody cares if you're like passionate about CS or whatever, like you have to prove it, right? And that's what these side projects are for. Like you need to build stuff that shows that, first of all, you're capable of programming, but second of all, that you're actually interested, and like in your free time, you do program on the side, right? And so all my friends that have gotten into like programming jobs in Silicon Valley have done those things. And so if you think that that's where you want to go, it's better to start early, because you'll find in university, you won't have as much time. And a lot of my friends' projects were actually completed while they were in high school. So yeah, keep that in the back of your mind if you think that's your goal. Okay, so the next question I have is, a lot of people are studying computer science. How do you evaluate the prospects of the industry? And so I think that there's a little bit of concern that the market is being oversaturated. Like everybody is going into computer science right now. But I think that those concerns are overblown, because if you look at the stats, like there are so many software engineer roles that are being unfilled right now. The demand for these jobs is a lot higher than the supply. And the job opportunities are, quite frankly, better in most regards. Not only do they pay more, but there's also more of them. So for example, if you were to go to Waterloo, at Waterloo, our job portal is this thing called Waterloo Works, where they basically like have a portal of maybe, let's say, 3,000 jobs every term that you can apply to. I'd say a good like 80% of them are software related jobs. So yeah, for somebody like me that was interested in finance, like if you're super interested in other areas, you could still find jobs if you put in the effort and really try to prove yourself as being worthy of working in one of those roles. But statistically, it's going to be more difficult just because there are less jobs. So not that it's deterring people from working in other industries. It's just that, it's just very much easier to get a job in computer science when there are just so much more jobs. So, that industry is just going to keep going up, up, up. Like it's not going to stop in the foreseeable future. But I will say this, if you are interested in like working in a computer science related field, it'd be like, obviously you need to do leak code and all the algorithm grind, but try to focus in on a specific area of computer science that you think you might be interested in. So for me, like software engineering work as a whole doesn't really interest me that much, just because I really don't like debugging things, which is a huge part of software engineering. But what interests me is kind of this application of computer science and finance. And so this kind of subsector that I'm interested in is more around machine learning. How can we use data to make investment decisions? Like that's a very niche area in computer science. I have friends that have started startup companies. So one of my friends is like an expert in computer vision. Computer vision is basically like you have an image, you need to recognize things in the image. It's super important for things like self-driving cars. Like your car needs to be able to say, oh, that's a stop sign. That's a human. I probably don't want to hit it. Things like that. And so, having a niche focus is, I would say, an added bonus, and it can really go a long way in terms of applications, because like imagine yourself interviewing for company X and they'll be like, why do you want to work for our company? Well, if you can talk about like, okay, I see that your company is doing some cool work in this specific subsector. I have these background experiences that really, make me an expert in this sector. That can really go a long way sometimes, rather than just being like a general person that likes doing coding. Yeah. So the next question is, how do you kind of deal with stress? Yeah, that's obviously a good question. It's almost going to be guaranteed that there's going to be some part of your university career that is stressful. For me, like last term was super stressful. Like I remember, obviously because of the coronavirus, right? So because of the coronavirus, a lot of jobs got canceled. Like at least 50% of our jobs got wiped out. And it was hard for me to find a job. Like I was stressed. I wasn't sleeping well. Like I was kind of like almost hallucinating in a sense. I went to the doctor's office to make sure like I was physically okay. The doctor was like, yeah, you're okay. It's just stress. So, being aware of it is, I would say, the first step. Like a lot of people try to hide their stress and they just go about like nothing is bothering them. I think that's a kind of a dangerous thing to do, because, if you let the stress build up, it can really be negative. So being open about your stress, I think, is pretty important. Like you can, if your parents ask you, hey, are you doing okay? Just like say, yeah, like dealing with a little bit of stress right now. It might be a little bit of an awkward conversation to have, but it's better you let people know what you're going through than just keeping it bottled up forever, right? So, and then obviously like try to find some activities that, allow you to de-stress. For me, like I go play like online chess when I'm feeling bored or tired or something like that. I'm sure all of you have like different outlets of entertainment. So yeah, like make sure not to cut out that in your life. As I said, if you have activities that are super relevant or important to you, like keep that in your life, because those things tend to be good de-stressors. So I see we have a question in the chat. So I'll go to that first. Is co-op required for every term in CS? If one can't find a co-op program, will a student be kicked out? So it depends. Like there exists computer science degrees that have no co-op. Like you can go to Waterloo and you can study computer science without co-op, but the co-op experience is like a pretty good thing to have. So most people usually don't do that. But I think what the more relevant part of this question is like, what happens if I can't find a co-op? That's something that a lot of first-year students, especially, have at the back of their mind. It's a real concern, especially in this world where, frankly speaking, there's less job opportunities than there were in 2019 because of coronavirus. You won't necessarily be kicked out of the program. Like Waterloo, I'd say it's pretty reasonable when it comes to these things. So this term, for example, by the way, it depends on your program as well. So my program, usually people do 6 co-op terms. The minimum is 5 to graduate. So even if like you don't find a job on one of your terms, which is typically the first term, you can still graduate. Like that's fine. You just put in more effort and make sure that doesn't happen again. But because of the coronavirus, like Waterloo cut that down to 4. So now you can miss 2 terms and you'll still be fine to graduate. Yeah, you can't. Often the first years have trouble finding a job just because you're competing against like 3rd and 4th years, so it's obviously a lot harder. But if you have those kind of like side projects or other things that you do, you'll be fine. The only reason you would have an issue finding a job is if you like do nothing outside of school and then your resume is just kind of lacking these other things that make you special, or you just have issues interviewing. And if you have like issues interviewing or writing a good resume or those things, those are all areas that upper years can help you in. So feel free to like reach out to upper years. And this is one of the better things about going to like clubs and organizations, which is they're all led by upper years, and clubs are a really good way for the first year students to like ask questions to upper year students. So make sure you get involved with them. So I see another question in the chat. What is the requirement to stay in the CS program? Yeah, those are things that you can find online. I think in computer science, personally, well, not personally, but like objectively, GPA really doesn't matter that much. Basically in computer science, like as long as you pass, you're good, because people know that computer science is a hard degree. And so you won't get kicked out unless you're getting like 50% averages. Like honestly, computer science, if you're above 60, you're fine. And for other programs, it might be a little bit higher. Like, so for example, in accounting, I think the average is like 75 or 70 to stay in or something like that. But keep in mind that those courses are like significantly easier. So, you know, if you have an issue getting 70 in those programs, like there's something that you're doing wrong. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about getting kicked out. Like I'm sure you guys are all good students. And even if you're like some average or even below average student, like as long as you put in some amount of effort, like you really shouldn't be getting kicked out. If I want to continue with master or PhD studies, do you think I should select program with co-op or without co-op, which is better? I think, you know, if you're going to study in like computer science, and if you want to go with a master's or PhD, you should be going for research positions. And there is a lot of positions where you can team up with a senior faculty member and try to help them on their research. These are things that, by the way, you can do during the school term. Like you don't have to take time off to do them. Like you can be studying and helping with research at the same time. So if your goal is to go into academia, like that's what you have to do. Yeah, that's what you have to do. I just see some message in the comments, like, could you answer question 13? Oh, yeah, I didn't get to that yet, but let's go to question 13. Okay, so how to improve GPA, what good advice do you have? So this brings me back to one of the first questions that I answered, which is you have to find study habits that are working for you. And this is going to vary from person to person. So I'll give you like an example of my university career. I was having trouble with some of my math courses because I was going to class and the professor was writing stuff on the board. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I just couldn't follow. And I didn't do that well initially. But I quickly realized that, you know, there are so many like online resources like Khan Academy and guys on YouTube that have like, you know, first year math courses and things like that. And so, you know, once I found like an instructor that worked for me, like on YouTube, it became very easy. Like I just got everything like that. And so, you know, don't feel like it's a one size fits all approach that, okay, here's the way I have to do it. I have to go to class, I have to read the textbook, and then I'll just ace the exam. Like that's very rare that everyone will find the same way that works for them. So finding a way that works for you is important. If you're one of those people that's like super good at reading textbooks and memorizing things, like stick to that. Why not? For me, like going to class is actually like not that helpful. Like to be honest, I don't even attend most of my classes because I'm just not a very good person when it comes to like listening to somebody speak and like jotting notes. That usually doesn't work for me. So what works for me is like watching YouTube videos and making notes from the textbook and doing practice questions. So just find the way that works for you and your GPA will definitely improve. So I'll go to the 14th question, which is during the COVID, the question's cut off. It got cut off, so I'll skip that. So I'll go to question 15. Is there any suggestions for grade 9 and 10 students who will want to earn their volunteer hours during the special time they have to stay home? Honestly, you guys will probably know more about that than me because, you know, it's been a long time since I've been in high school. And so I don't know what's going on, but at least from what I've heard on the news, like I think volunteer hours are not mandatory. Like obviously if I'm wrong, but that's what I've heard. But if you want to volunteer, like if you just like I don't know off the top of my head, honestly, but I think if you just Google like volunteer experiences or something, like there should be ways you can do this. Or, you know, a lot of like online tutoring is going on right now. So if you have some certain knowledge in a field that you can easily provide online, like for me, like it's chess, right? So I can easily teach people chess online. So that's not an issue for me. So like, I know there's a lot of tutoring that's going on online right now. Like I have friends that are working for Kumon and they're still delivering lessons online. So I'm assuming that there's like similar opportunities to volunteer out there. But yeah, I mean, just keep an eye out for those. And I think that's the end of the question list that I had. So I guess with that, like I'll open it up to just general Q&A. Like feel free to post anything in the chat, or if there's any question that you felt like I should, you know, re-explain, or anything outside the list, any other questions, like, you know, I guess now's the time to fire away.
So, Michael, yeah, it's me. I just in the same time listen to you and see the question. I think you talk about the people from the WeChat ask. You talk about the US, and now you're working in the Canadian like computer science major, the staffs. So, what the difference between the US and also Canada, and what do you think for the future? Where you aim to be work in which country?
That's a good question. It's not a one size fits all answer. I can't say USA is better or Canada is better. Like there's so many things that you have to take into consideration. So, I mean, let's start with the benefits of working in USA, especially like when it comes to CS, like this is basically California. It's a cool place to be. Like there's no denying that, right? Like most of the people work in Silicon Valley and domestic flights are like super cheap. So like when I was working in Silicon Valley, I would go to like Los Angeles one weekend. I would go to like Las Vegas the other weekend, or San Diego, or somewhere like in the national parks. So there's a lot of cool things to do there. So that's, you know, part of the reasons why a lot of people just want to go work there. Second reason people want to go work there is generally like you make a lot of money, right? Like let's be frank, that's basically the big reason people want to work in Silicon Valley. And if you can find a good opportunity, like, you know, I'd say most people would probably have that at the top of their list. Like, let's say you can get into like a Google full time, like probably I'd say 95% of people would take that. But I think what's more important than just where you work is, you know, what's important to you. Because like, let's say you have family in Toronto and, you know, you need to help out your family, then maybe you feel like more comfortable being in Toronto. Or let's say one of your managers is like really, really good, puts a lot of trust in you and gives you a good offer, then, you know, it might be tempted to take that, right? For me, like my first manager, I worked in Calgary, Alberta for my first co-op, and my manager was like the best manager I ever had. And so like I was very tempted to return there, even though the job, you know, paid less than what I would get in Silicon Valley. Like I was still thinking of returning just because, you know, it was such a good person and really gave me a lot of cool chances to learn. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's not just like a USA versus Canada thing. It just depends on like your other opportunities, I guess.
Okay, so there is a 14 question. I think they are not properly translated, but in the WeChat, the 14 question is the first time you apply for the co-op, there is the GPA has the minimum like a start, or how long you should be applied for the first co-op, and later on the co-op is only based on the before you have the experience or not.
Okay, so I also tackled the first part of that question. GPA is dependent on what field you're going for. Quite frankly, if you're going for computer science jobs, like GPA basically means nothing. A lot of people are surprised to hear that, but what computer science employers look for is does this person know how to code? Are they passionate about it? And so they'll look for things like side projects, and also in the coding interview, they'll grill you on the technicals there. They really don't care about your GPA. However, if you're going to like a more traditional field like finance, GPA is super important. That's just the way it is. And I have friends that are going to like maths or health science, and GPA is like right at the top of the list there. So if you're going to like med or anything like that, then GPA is like really, really important. So that depends on what field you're going to. And in terms of like the second part of the question, which I think was, are future co-ops based on previous co-ops? Like to a large part, yes. If you have good previous co-ops, like that obviously helps you in future applications, right? That's why it's like much easier to apply to co-ops as a third or fourth year than it is a first year. So getting a first good co-op, I'd say, is like, it's a pretty significant advantage in the long run. So really, that first job hunt is going to be super important, and just go all out in there. And I just see like there's one more question in the chat, which I think is pretty good. Except CS and finance, are there any other popular combinations of CS and other programs? Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of things that are going on in like hardware, for example, like building robotics. A lot of people are trying to work for companies like Tesla right now that are making those self-driving cars. Like that's obviously CS related, right? And in the health science field, there's obviously a huge booster as well. I'll give you an example. Like one of my friends, she's doing research in like modeling infectious diseases with AI, which if you think about it, like is super relevant right now. Like how can we use AI to predict the spread of coronavirus, right? Like these are areas that are just going to they're just going to keep increasing in the future. And if you look at the stock market, which I look at very often, a lot of the companies that are doing well right now are companies that are using AI to make certain health products, like whether that's for cancer detection or if it's for like, trying to find a cure for coronavirus. Like these are the companies that are just printing money right now. And so, yeah, there's like a huge, and these are just like two examples, by the way, but you can almost find an intersection with computer science and anything. Like it's really helpful. So I guess, are there any other questions that I should address? Or
I think the people ask you, where did you learn your chess? Like from the.
I don't know. I just kind of did it myself. I obviously had coaches. Like I didn't do it all myself, but like chess is one of those things. Like first of all, you have to have some natural talent, and that's not to brag or anything like that, but it's true. Like people that are good at anything, like there's always a degree of talent in play. But the second part is like you have to put in the effort. So especially when I work with my students right now, I always tell them like, when I work with you, this is 5% basically of the learning experience. Like the other 95% you have to put in. And so that includes things like, following like top chess events, or learning like a new opening on the side, or doing your own research. Like you just have to be invested in it to get good. Like it's as simple as that.
Okay, I think before you gave the hint, like if you apply the computer science, your GPA not super high, you still can get some like advantage if you attend some competition, right? For the like participate. It doesn't mean you need to get a super good result, but just participate. That's right?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, obviously that's not to say the GPA doesn't matter. Like, if you have a super high GPA, like that's obviously all the power to you, and it's gonna count for something. But for most people, that's not the case. And in terms of the application, like applying to universities, doing things like Waterloo's computer science competition, it won't hurt you. Like it can only help you. And then in terms of applying to jobs, doing side projects and all those things, like again, super important.
Okay, so like you said, because a lot of people are worried about kick out from the university. I see some people also asked, but I heard from the U of T, their computer science like very like first year they already low rate for the who is continue to this major. What the matter? Why the people left from this major? Or because of the GPA matter, or because of the call?
So I would say that like there's a lot of rumors that U of T kicks out a lot of people, and most of them aren't true. So I'd say like whatever news you're getting from like WeChat or things, like keep in mind that a lot of it is exaggerated to some extent. Um, a lot of people just aren't getting kicked out. By the way, a lot of people that get quote unquote kicked out, it's not because that the school is like, hey, you suck, you have to leave. It's mainly like largely in part that they go into a field like computer science and then they realize, oh, I really just don't like this field. And then they switch majors. And that's perfectly fine. Like if you're doing something that you're not happy with, like there's no reason not to switch out. So in terms of the people that actually like computer science and put like a good effort into it, there's a very low rate of people that are actually kicked out. But if you are having difficulties, right? Then a lot of universities have like office hours or things that you can go to, like take advantage of that. Especially like if you're really struggling, like do see your professor because that also shows that you put in the effort, that you're trying, right? And so if you find yourself in a case where, let's say, you end up with like 49 or 48% in the final, but you constantly went to the professor and you constantly asked for help, there's a very good chance the professor will just bump that up to 50 and pass you because they know that you actually put in the effort. So like make use of every resource that you have.
Okay, I think there is people also ask you that like you for your future you want to stay in for yourself just on you if you like stay in Canada or you want to go to US because you have both like experience, right? Either this way, how you will go for your future.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one of the things that I actually wanted to do in co-op was to go to 6 different cities. So I was 3 for 3. Like my first co-op was in Calgary, and then my second was in Toronto. Then my third one was in San Francisco. This year I'm in Toronto, so I kind of broke that trend, but still trying to go to as many cities as possible. And really, like if you're going to a university like Waterloo where you have to travel, finding out where you want to live is actually super important as well. So for me, like what can I say? I can't see myself staying in Toronto. Like for some reason, I just never liked the city that much. Like I really liked Calgary because it was like right beside the national parks, and I like to go out and hike and things like that. So I really like that city. And then San Francisco was really cool as well. There's just a nice charm about that city. In terms of where I see myself in the future, it's like it really depends on the opportunity, right? Like if I get some super good job offer in California, like I'll probably go there. If I don't, then I don't know, maybe I'll go to like Calgary or something. I'm also trying to go to New York and trying to give that a shot as well. Uh, but yeah, like especially in this climate where like you can't even get a visa to work in the US. I think it's difficult to really say that in 2 years I'm going to be in this location and I know it. It's just not predictable right now. And so I think instead of trying to force something to happen, what you should be looking out for is looking out for the types of people that you think you want to work with. Because in your first job, like your title is really not that important. How much you make is really also not that important because chances are within 1 or 2 years you'll be gone. You'll find another job, right? But what is important is like, is your manager good? Like, does he or she believe in you, and are they willing to give you opportunities that will, push your career forward instead of being held back? So I think those are the things that I actually look out for more than just like the physical location of where I work in. So yeah, that's what I would say for that question. So I see a good question in the chat, which is you mentioned that if you go to your profs and ask for help a lot, they'll bump up your mark. will they not get annoyed if you consistently ask for help though? Yeah, so keep in mind that professors are trained for these type of scenarios. Like there's always students that they're like, honestly, they're putting in a good effort. They're really trying their best and they just don't get it, right? So professors are trained for these type of students. And if you happen to be one of them that's just not getting something, like don't be shy to ask your professor for help, because that's what they're there for. And so you might be a little bit shy like the first time, but you'll find out that these are not just professors, like they're actually people too. So, you can be friends with them and have relationships with them. That's probably poorly worded, not relationships, but like, academic relationships. But yeah, like they're also people, and like you shouldn't feel shy to just go out and talk to them. Okay, share some suggestions to grade 9 or 10 kids that are interested in computers. Yeah, as I said, trying to find a side project that you can work on is super important at a young age. So what's going to be very difficult, it's going to be difficult to pitch to a grade 9 kid that, hey, you should learn C++, which is like a super hard language to learn, and just learn it because you'll get a good job later. Like that typically is not going to work, because what's going to happen is the person's going to be like, this is too hard. I don't know what's going on. And so they'll quit early on. But what you need to do is that you need to find a project that you find is going to be interesting. So for example, like if you're interested in chess, then maybe you can try to build your own chess engine, right? Like try to build a chess computer or something like that. And just find something that interests you and then build it, because you just learn so much more by doing that than by doing like some random like Code Academy or something like that. So building a project is by far the best thing you can do, especially as a as a younger person just getting started in CS. So can you talk about your AP and IB program in high school, or you're in public school? What do you think is most important in high school for you? Yeah, I could talk about that. So I personally was in the IB program. So for those of you that are not familiar with it, the IB program is basically some international program based out of Switzerland. It's kind of similar to AP, like they give you more challenging courses and things like that. In all honesty, it's really not that challenging, at least personally. But it's basically like just an enriched program, right? What do you think is important for high school? I think finding the study strategies that worked for you. Like I constantly say this over and over again, but in high school, like to be frank, some of you may agree, some of you may disagree, but I'm just going to say it. I think that the workload is really not that hard. Like I think that if you're putting in a reasonable amount of effort, like there should be no reason that you're struggling in high school. At least that's just my opinion. But that's not true for university. Like in university, you can be going all out, you can be studying all night, and you could still be having trouble. So what you need to do in high school is just find the study strategies, like whether that's like highlighting notes in a certain way. You need to figure things out. Like, am I going to type down my notes, or am I going to like write them by hand? Like which way works better for me? Or when I'm studying, like, am I going to watch YouTube videos, or am I going to just like read the textbook? Those are all things that you have to figure out. One thing that I figured out for myself is like, I actually study a lot better when I'm standing up than when I'm sitting down. I don't know why. It just works for me. Like I'm standing up right now. I have a standing desk, and it makes me more productive. So yeah, just find out what works for you. Like that's, I think, the most important thing in high school. Okay, so last question I see is that, do you think AP is helpful for university application? Yes. I mean, like, I think any kind of enriched program, whether it's AP or IB or like TOPS, I know is another one. There's like a million programs out there, and they all help, right? But what's important is that first of all, you do well, especially if you're applying to Ontario universities. Like you need a pretty high GPA to get into the most competitive programs. That's not to say like you have to go to one of these programs. Like statistically speaking, most people do not go to an enriched program, right? And they still get into university. So it's not like you have to go to AP, you have to go to IB. You can still go to just like some random public, not university, some public high school and be fine. Like if you put in the effort and get like some 97, 98 average, you'll be fine. It doesn't matter. If you're applying to the US, however, I'd say going to like AP or IB is a pretty significant advantage, just because they are like more international programs and I guess recognized more by US schools. Yeah, I mean, like the bottom line is that it can only help you, like it won't hurt you. So yeah, I think that's.
So Michael, I want to ask you one more question. How
Sure.
the rate acceptance in your major in Waterloo? Like how many applicants, how acceptance rate? I think that mostly people want to know how the software engineering, computer science is hardly get in.
Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head. If I had to guess, I would say the rate of acceptance is maybe something like 15 to 20%. I don't know. Let's just pull a number off the top of my head. It could be wrong. I could be way off here, but that would be my estimate. But keep in mind that like these, like almost like there's so many people that are interested in this program that, it's really not that difficult if you have the right GPA, because the average applicant is not that competitive, to be honest, right? Just think about like every time you did a math contest and you think, oh, I did terrible on this contest, and you're still like top 25%. At least that's what happened to me a lot of the times. So as long as you put in a good effort, like it honestly shouldn't be that difficult to get in. Like I had no computer science experience whatsoever, and I still got into my program, right? So like it's not like a wall that's impossible to get through. For US universities, it's a lot more difficult though. So, but for Canadian universities, like as long as you have a good GPA, like you should be fine.
Okay, so I think everybody already asked and we answered. Is the time also, we already passed another 2 minutes, but we almost done, so for the questions. 所以呢，我呢在此呢也非常感谢啊 ，Michael 呢能够在今天呢给大家分享的这个1个多小时，其实已经超过了10分钟。但是我刚才呢也让呢就是大家又多问了一道问题，然后我刚刚又问了一下这个项目，就是这个计算机和金融专业的这个acceptance， 就是它的那个录取情况。刚才也讲了，其实呢这个项目是非常 competitive 的，也是非常有竞争力的。只不过呢，当然它和美国的大学不太一样，但是我相信呢很多的孩子呢在加拿大的孩子都想进呢，尤其男孩子哈，当然女孩子可能会有一些人也很希望这个 program， 因为以后的工作呢也是比较 stable， 就相对比较对吧稳定，而且呢就是说可能就是说也会有很多的机会找工作，所以呢我觉得呢这些东西都是今天的 Michael 跟我们大家一起分享的，我们也非常感谢 Michael 在这儿呢再一次感谢，也感谢呢艾维教育呢给大家提供的平台，然后呢我们每一周的呢周日的晚上8点都会有不同的那个加拿大的大学，因为我们之前做过美国的加拿大的大学的这些不同专业的学生来给我们分享。那我们呢在此呢感谢今天所有参与的朋友，也感谢呢 Michael， 还有呢就是说，当然你的父母也是非常支持的，我们也要再次感谢。然后呢我们有机会再见，好吗 Michael？ 谢谢。
Okay, sounds good. And thanks everyone for listening. And hopefully I was able to answer some of the questions that you had. Okay.